right, it's the nose. And we have a split nose today. We have like sort of hockey lines noses, or one nose that is two hockey lines. I don't know. I probably should have thought this through. But in fact, we're going to begin with three panelists to talk about Department Q, a new series on Netflix. And then in the second segment, we will bring in three entirely new nose panelists to talk about the Paul Reubens, Pee Wee Herman documentary that's currently on HBO Max, if that's what they're calling it today. I think they are calling it HBO Max today. It's Friday, right? So that'll be the plan. There'll be some endorsements at the end. Let's get going on this. We are going to begin, as I said, with Department Q. This is an adaptation an adaptation of a series of Danish crime novels by Jussi. I should know this because I've actually read a couple of them. It's Jussi Adler-Olsen, I think is his name. But however, it is set in Scotland, in Edinburgh, in the Edinburgh Police Force, despite the fact that a lot of the characters still have Danish names, and directed by an American showrunner, Scott Frank. So here to talk about it is panel number one. Nose panel number one is Rich Hollant, founder and principal of CoLab, Hall of Fame designer, co-partner at Center. Irene Papoulis wrote a short textbook called The Essays Only You Can Write. We're also coming to the end of an era. Irene has been teaching at Trinity. She'll be retiring in roughly the next 30 days or so, I would assume. Bill Usman is professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. You'll meet the other half of our news in a little while here. Let's get going on Department Q. You're going to hear a little clip here. You're going to hear Matthew Goode as the protagonist, DCI Carl Morck, and Kate Dickey as Moira Jacobson, who is his supervisor. Here we go.
Well, my own department.
Congratulations.
Are you joking?
It's been commissioned by the Cabinet Secretary himself.
Really?
Yeah, you'll be reviewing cold cases from all over the country. There's a list here from the Crown Office. You can pick whichever ones you want. And you'd have your own contact there if you'd like.
Contact? Well, so I'm lawyer.
If you'd like.
Who exactly will I be in charge of?
Just you.
A department of just me?
Oh, you'll have an office, whatever resources you need.
Well, I need a car.
No, we can't just give you a car. This isn't The Price is Right.
You just said I'd be reviewing cases all over the country. What happens if I get one in Inverness? Do you expect me to take a bus?
I'll see what I can do. So, can I tell the Deputy Chief Constable that you're on board?
Where's this office? Q? Where the hell's that?
Downstairs.
The office is a number downstairs, Moira.
I mean, downstairs.
And it turns out downstairs is a fairly unpleasant place. This is very much a show about people confined in unpleasant quarters. The detectives are, so is the victim. And it's actually, I think, a little bit of the style of this particular writer, too. Having read a little bit more into this series, I can tell you that he seems to enjoy putting people in situations like that where they can't get out of some horrible situation. So let's get going with the conversation about this. Bill Usman, maybe you can get us started. Just a thumbnail, how did this go for you so far?
I like this show a fair bit. I mean, my big question is, when do the puppets show up? I keep waiting for the puppets.
Yeah, I had that thought too.
That's a terrible joke, but I just can't resist continuing to make it. What is wrong with me? So yeah, I do like this show quite a bit. I would say there's a lot going on. I think it's definitely not one of those shows that is deliberately made for multitasking or distracted audiences. I think you do have to pay attention to what's going on, and yay, like, I embrace that fully. Let's have more stuff that is like that. It's really layered. There's a lot of an interesting structure. There's these parallel storylines, which, no spoilers, but for me, at least in the first episode, they intersected in a way that was really surprising and that I was really intrigued by. I think the cast is terrific. Maybe we'll talk about that more. Great characters. Really interesting dialogue. We could hear even in that clip that you showed. There's a lot of wit to it, even though it's dealing with grim situations. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think that there is wit there, and there is. I mean, we should say that Carl Morck, played by Matthew Goode, you might remember from Downton Abbey or The Crown or The Offer, in which he played Bob Evans during the scaling up of the movie The Godfather. He plays this kind of curmudgeon, this guy that is just unfailingly rude and blunt to everybody around him. And
there's a word Jonathan told us we can't use.
Yes, but he's one of those. So, Rich, I know this landed a little bit differently for you. So, say a little bit about how you found it.
Well, a little bit. Right now would be that I really like old cars, and I had like this old MG midget, and the thing about it is, you turn the key and you never really know what it's going to do. And it sputters and it's just like unconvinced. And sometimes it's unconvincing when you're driving it for the first couple of miles. And you're like, maybe I should just turn around and park this thing back at home. But if you hang in with it a little bit longer, it catches and it's a really good ride. I found this thing like kind of almost intolerable for the first episode. And I hung in with the second episode to see if it was going to catch. And up until maybe the last 45 seconds of the second episode, I was ready to give up on this thing. And then it just turned into something completely new. What I found that I was doing while I was watching these characters evolve in this story that seems to be about built on an architecture of like shame and fear and grief. What I felt like these characters, particularly the main character that you were referring to, this guy, Carl, I thought he was a ghost at first. There's the thing that happens in the first 30 seconds. Can we give this away? Because it was like the first minute of this thing.
I can't even remember what happens in the first. I've watched all 9 episodes. So
all right.
I can't remember
what happens in the first like minute and a half of this show is 3 officers are investigating a murder scene, and they all 3 get shot, including him. And they're lying in pools of blood, And then about 5 minutes into the show, this guy's back, right? So to make sense of anything, I was running my own kind of detective story based on every movie I've ever seen, And so I was like, oh, maybe this is kind of like what the heck is that movie? Bruce Willis and the little kid. I see dead people.
The Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense. It's a little bit like this. Is this guy actually dead? And
now you ruined that movie, Rich.
Yeah.
Oh, did I ruin? Yeah, I ruined this.
I think the statute of limitations is there also. Yeah.
So I was like making up what this thing could possibly be about, just so I could hang in with it. And it turned out to actually not be what I was imagining, which I thought would have been a great storyline. And it turned into something better, something more nuanced. And placing it in Scotland right now is actually really important. It's important to what's going on globally.
I think that's an important thing too. And the fact that this character, who has a Danish name, but is actually from the UK, from England, excuse me. He's from England. That's another way of kind of multinationalizing this thing. He for some reason or other is working in Scotland, but he is not really one of them quite exactly. He doesn't have the accent, and he doesn't have the sensibilities. And I think that's an important thing too. I want to go to Irene here, but before I do, I quickly want to say just a word or two about Scott Frank. Scott Frank's the showrunner on this. I think a lot of people. He's been around as a screenwriter for a long time for Get Shorty, Out of Sight, Minority Report. He also is the most employed, or was the most employed rewriter in Hollywood. He has rewritten nearly 60 movies, including Saving Private Ryan, and including some movies he doesn't know the names of because they're like most of the X-Men movies. I think he rewrote at some point or other. And then he came to us with Queen's Gambit a few years ago and really just seemed to be a masterpiece of show running, directing, storytelling, and then faltered a little bit with Monsieur Spade. I think that's less successful. But in general, with Scott Scott Frank, you kind of know you're in good hands, and the awakening that Rich and the series have to each other, I think, is attributable to the fact this guy really knows how to tell a story. He really knows how to present stuff. This is not a perfect series, but we are, I think, in good hands. So Irene, tell us how you're thinking about this.
Well, in a way, I had the opposite reaction from Rich, because I absolutely loved it at the beginning. I thought the whole first episode was fantastic because I was pulled in so much by the characters and the dialogue, and especially the character of a man who everyone thinks is a jerk, but has nuances beyond that we're going to slowly discover. And I was really interested in that. By the time, but I've watched all 9 episodes, and Rich, I don't know whether you have or not, but by the time I got to the end, I felt frustrated because I felt like it didn't really realize the things that I wanted it to be going. It didn't go into the things that I wanted it to be going into, even though there was, the drama was pretty good, but.
Can I take a guess at what one of those things might have been? Because I really like this series a lot, but I had some problems with it. And we should say that the UK's acting bench is, as usual, showcased here. I mean, just all kinds of people. Everything that comes out of the UK these days is a little bit of a Harry Potter and Game of Thrones reunion. And there are a lot of people from that. And Kate Dickie from Game of Thrones, the ever-lactating character in Game of Thrones, is in this. But Kelly Macdonald, who I think is just a tremendous actor, plays a psychotherapist in this. Except that Irene, I think she's underutilized. I can't get enough Kelly Macdonald. I want more Kelly Macdonald all the time. But it's one of those things where not only is Carl Morck the typical, almost cliched, unwilling, forced to go by management psychotherapy communicant, but she's not interested either. I mean, at no point in 9 episodes does she make any kind of real effort to have a psychotherapy session with this guy. And I don't know if that's one of the things you were hoping for, Irene, that somehow there'd be some kind of breakthrough. He gets some kind of, a better sense of himself. But I mean, I think they skate away from that chance.
Absolutely. I agree. And I did think at the beginning, I thought, okay, this is the strategy, the certain strategy of I'm not really going to push. I'm just going to let you be where you are, and all that is a good sort of therapeutic strategy. But if that's all it is, it's a little tricky. And then the way the plot turned out, and what happened between the two of them, it didn't really make sense. That was one of them. Yeah. That was one of the things, and I have a couple of other ones.
Okay, well, maybe we'll get to those. So hopefully we will. Bill Huesman, I don't know if you want to say a little bit about the acting here. There are some. I should also say, fans of the PBS series Annika will note that Kate Dickie is kind of in the same role here as she is in there, and then Jamie Sives, who plays Annika's partner, is now the partner or the ex-partner, maybe, of Matthew Goode's Carl Morck. He was one of the other policemen shot in that episode, and he has lost either permanently or temporarily. We don't want to really say the use of his legs. But I don't know, Bill, anything jump out at you about the acting?
Well, I agree with you about Kelly Macdonald, both in terms of how good she is, but also more. Like, let's bring her in more. I'm currently rewatching The Sopranos, and we talked about Mobland a few weeks ago. So it's like, oh, here's, crime and therapy together. It's like peanut butter and chocolate. They go so well. But I would have liked to have seen more of that as well. And there were also hints of potentially a very unethical romantic connection between them, which they never really explored any further. So I agree with that. I think that somebody's going to have to help me with how the actor's name is pronounced. The person who plays Akram.
We can help you maybe with
Alexei?
that.
Is it Alexei Manvelov?
Yeah, that'll do. I
don't
think he listens to the show. So
Alexei Manvelov. I'm butchering it, but he's terrific as we mentioned the Syrian who is not really a detective, but is brought in and just has a really intriguing backstory, which I also would have liked to have seen more of. I mean, should this have maybe have been 12 episodes instead of 9? And we could have gotten into that a little bit. It seems like there will probably be future seasons, so it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
There's more than 10 books to work with.
So it could go on and on and on. Yeah. Leah Byrne as Rose, Jamie Sives as James Hardy.
It might be Sives. Actually, let's give everybody a little taste of some of those voices. We've got a clip here. You're going to hear Jamie Sives as D.I. Hardy. That's the wounded and possibly paraplegic partner, and Leah Byrne as DC Rose Dixon. I mean, it's interesting because this is, among other things, if this is going to go on, then this series is the kind of building the team, getting the team together. The team is, it turns out,
Avengers number 1.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be 3, but there really are going to be 4 people all working together. Let's hear a little bit of Jamie Sives as Hardy and Leah Byrne as Rose, 2 of the team members.
They had somebody write for it, didn't they? He died trying to get away. Henry somebody.
Harry Jennings.
Harry Jennings, start there.
With the dead guy.
With the dead guy, with his family, with his friends, with his goldfish. You're looking for connections.
This was nearly 20 years ago. It's probably got nothing to do with Harry.
Probably not, but every spoke leads you back to the hub, so pick one and make it your own.
Carl tell you that.
Nero Wolfe.
Whoever the that is. And what spoke are you going to follow?
What all happened in the weeks after the disappearance?
We don't know what happened.
Well, we don't know what happened to Merritt, but she existed in the world. She caused ripples with people, institutions, things, and these ripples in turn cause patterns in her life. It can be useful to see if these patterns change after one ceases to exist.
Nero Wolfe again.
That one was Carol.
But that would assume that it was somebody already in our life that took her.
It's a guess, aye. But that's what we start with, isn't it? Guesses. We just happen to call them theories.
I love any Nero Wolfe reference. Nero Wolfe played a big role in my life.
Great.
So, Rich, having you in particular and your visual sensibilities here, I was surprised it didn't even come up in your first set of comments here. This does have a very interesting visual signature, particularly, I think, this place that they wind up kind of exiled to, this kind of office dungeon. But there's, just in terms of design and the look of this, not just that, but even, there's a scene where he has to go talk to the cop who worked the case the first time, and it's in this church where he's helping people with rehab, and the whole thing just kind of glows. And I'm just wondering, how you felt about the visual signature.
So the intensity of light is just beautiful. These scenes are color timed and handled in a really lush way. It makes these sort of closed off, isolated places come to life, and you don't get bored with them. There's a crunchiness to the shadows in this show that allows things to happen where you don't see them fully. And so it helps to kind of enhance the mystery that's happening in a lot of this. It's so much of what's unseen is part of the narrative. There's a piece that I've noted, though, that's along with cinematography and the visual effect is also the director's choices, right? Mm-hmm. And this director is making impeccable choices. And I almost wish that there was more time to explore them more. For the first, 2 episodes in its entirety, I noted that this Carl character, the guy that got shot at the very beginning, nobody touched him, and he didn't touch anybody. And they were in close proximity in scenes. There's a scene where he's passing in a narrow kitchen doorway with his son, and they manage to direct it in a way that they make no physical contact whatsoever. There's a time where the one time is, it starts to intensify the sense of isolation for this guy. Someone went to shake his hand, and it happened within the crop of the image. You didn't actually see the handshake take place. It's unusual when, as a director, you want to see that piece of contact when it's offered, but it happened below the image line. And there's a place where he was heading up to a podium to do a press conference where his supervisor went to seem like she was grabbing him by the arm, to guide him to the thing, but the shadow was so dense there that you couldn't see the point of contact.
Yeah.
And the point.
We're almost out of time here, and
the one other thing.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Take it over.
Okay, so just quickly, let's go to Irene here because we're going to have to go to a break here pretty soon. But Irene, either comment on the visual stuff that Rich is talking about, which, by the way, I missed 90% of that because I'm so not visually attuned the way that you are, Rich, and it's just so interesting to hear what somebody sees who can really knows how to look at things. I don't know whether you want to talk about that, Irene, or one of the things you feel was not dealt with adequately in addition to the therapy problem.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting to hear you talk about that, Rich, because I think a lot of the sense that I got, or that Colin, I'm sure, got too, of his personality and of what was going on was generated by that, even if we weren't consciously aware of it. And that's really interesting because his acting was so good as the person who, is so reluctant to really be intimate with people in the way that we usually think of it. The one thing I did want to say too is about the Syrian guy. I mean, it's okay, maybe they're going to develop it in other episodes, but I felt like it was such an opportunity to learn something about Syria and to sort of go beyond the stereotype, which we didn't get to do. We didn't get to go beyond the stereotype, really. I mean, he was not exactly stereotypical, but in a way, but it was all a big mystery. And what is Syria? And we didn't even know. And I think that there could have been an opportunity to just bring some kind of understanding of what the Syrian people have gone through, and not in a didactic way, but just in a way that would humanize him in a different way. And I'm going
to sound overprotective of the show when I say this. I think there's an argument. There are a lot of people who don't talk about things, particularly if they come from someplace else where horrible things happen, and maybe they did some of those horrible things. Or try getting a member of the Greatest Generation to talk about World War II at all. I mean, they could be fighting the Battle of the Bulge and never talk about it. So I do think that even kind of dramatically, there's something, maybe significant about his unwillingness.
Okay, I appreciate that he didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. That was great, but it seemed like there should. I don't know exactly how it would work, but I felt like we could have learned something even if he didn't talk about it. I don't know. Well,
there'll be a season 2. We'll find out more about Akram. We've got to stop here thanks to this wonderful panel. And so thanks to Rich Hollant and Bill Usman and Irene Papoulis. We're going to take a break. We're going to be back with a brand new panel and a whole new thing to talk about. If you know your Pee Wee Herman, you know why that's playing. By the way, I believe that's Glenn Campbell on the guitar. The Champs were sort of like the studio band at Tequila. All right, so we're going to talk about this remarkable documentary about Paul Reubens and Pee Wee Herman. Before we do this, let me tell you who's on the panel right now. David Edelstein is America's greatest living film critic. Jacques Lamarre is a playwright and chief communication officer at Buzz Engine. I can't believe that he's here today because his new play, The Baroness, opens tonight at Playhouse on Park in West Hartford, runs through June 22nd. Tickets and more info at playhouseonpark.org. It's called The Baroness, and it has something to do with the Von. I don't know too much about it. I can't wait to go see it. And Carolyn Paine, also with us today, actress and comedian, and she's the founder and director of CONNetic Dance and the creative producer and choreographer for the Bushnell Digital Institute. And also, I should say that on Saturday night, Carolyn and I will be hosting or emceeing or trying to impose some kind of order on Art for ACT, Art for ACT. ACT is Advancing Connecticut Together. It's a great nonprofit here, and you can get tickets and you get a free piece of art. And you get to ignore instructions that Carolyn and I are trying to give you, and you can go on the World Wide Web, as they call it, go to act-ct.org. And you can get your tickets and stuff. Carolyn and I never know how to tell people to get the tickets. All right, so on to Pee Wee Herman, on to Paul Reubens, and this remarkable feature on, it's a two-parter a two-part documentary on HBO Max, and we are going to talk about it. It's called Pee-wee as himself, and I don't know, maybe just before we go to a clip here or anything, let's just sort of go around the table here and see how people are feeling about it. And David, one reason that I got interested in this and then I got interested in having you on is that you kind of put a cri de coeur up on Facebook, just talking about, I mean, this is a very interesting and poignant series because it's about a wonderful, amazing thing that happened, this kind of almost avant-garde performance art that got turned into this wonderful mass market program for children. But it's also a documentary about a lot of things that didn't happen in the life of the man who created it. But say a little bit more about how it made you feel.
Well, as I said on Facebook, and Colin, I overshare. I'm probably going to overshare here. But this beautiful and evocative and funny and heartbreaking weave of talking heads and clips, it was sort of too much for me because when he is being interviewed, and of course he died in 2023 of cancer, and he did not tell the filmmaker Matt Wolf that he had cancer. He's there staring into the camera, and you see a guy who just has life popping out of him like little electric coils. I mean, he's alert and he's sardonic and he's scared because he's coming out literally for the first time. And he's so exuberant through it all. And I just thought, this guy is more alive than anyone I've ever seen on the screen in years. And he's dead. And I found that so painful because he was a precious resource. And we did get to experience that, but not enough, and certainly not enough in the last 25 years of his life when he should have had vehicle after vehicle after vehicle. He should have been a constant presence in pop culture, and he wasn't for the reasons that I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yes, we absolutely are. Let's hear a little clip from this before we go to Jacques and Carolyn. You're going to hear Paul Reubens. This is kind of a soliloquy from, I get the wrong thing here. What are we going to hear first? Oh, we're going to hear something from earlier in part one, talking about sort of one of the ways in which he was discovered as an acting talent before the Pee-wee thing ever happened. So this is B1, Maestro.
We were holding auditions just for classes. And Paul's choice was to be a waiter with a tray, one of these guys. And he just walked around from group to group, and all we saw was his reaction on his face to what they were saying.
I could steal focus from the best of them. I could steal focus from anybody. I could walk out on a stage in the middle of a scene and do something very subtly that you would just draw right to that. It was fun. It was a power. And I started to use that.
It totally blew me away because everybody that auditions, they try to stand out, and they try to do it by being louder, bigger, faster, all of the obvious things. I hadn't ever seen anybody do it by being quieter. He's calculating, but you're not watching him calculate. You're just seeing the result of somebody who's in control. He's just always in control on stage.
And, Carolyn, listening to that, I'm thinking also about what David was just talking about, because one of the things that Paul Reubens does as Paul Reubens in this documentary is do a lot of things with his face and his eyes and playing this kind of cat and mouse game with Matt Wolf, who is directing this. And he'll say, well, I'm going to say this unless I'm not going to say this. And sometimes he'll indicate an entirely different agenda with the movement of his eyes. You get the feeling that even playing himself, he's still doing a lot of acting.
Yeah, I found myself so entranced in this. I was of the age that like Pee Wee Herman was on TV and the movies were out. And I guess like I was a fan, like I really liked them, but through a child's eye, like I saw them as funny and silly and colorful and wild and weird. And, I had the toys. And so my relationship with Paul Reubens prior to this was, just that. And, then knowing his kind of like fall from grace and disappearance. And then, I know he was in all these other small roles in different movies, but getting to know him through this and seeing how masterful he was in every sense. I mean, this is a man who he is like carefully selecting how those faces he is making and how he is reacting, the control that he has as a performer that like never stops. He was like never not on in this documentary. He was like never not on in life. And as somebody who is a comedian and an actor, like that's mind blowing to have that kind of skill and to want that kind of control. And the way that he like took that kind of control and then, you know, just made that his art, and the way he was able to then control his art and make art of something that like is essentially an avant-garde performance piece. And he made it this like mainstream children's show is just wild. So I left this with so much more respect for him than I ever thought I could have, especially because, you know, like the last that you really thought about Pee Wee Herman was like, you know, him being labeled as a pedophile and sort of really having everything ripped from him. So for me, this was like really empowering. And I for him to, I think, get this sort of one song glory.
Yeah, it's you know, it's a weird documentary in the sense that it's an origin story. You really see for the first time how this came together, how it gestated, and how it became what it became. And it's also a farewell song, all at the same time. You're hearing the whole origin story, and you're saying goodbye to this guy. You know, Jacques, there's a clip that we're not going to play just because I don't have time for it right now. But it's early in the documentary. He just talks about when his first major relationship breaks up. He just decides he's not going to do this anymore. That making the Pee Wee Herman thing is going to take precedence over the Paul Reubens thing, and that he really feels like he can't afford to be seen as gay. It just won't work anymore. He won't be marketable, and he's just going to submerge who he is. And I don't know, just tell me a little bit about what your reaction to that was, the constant tension between Pee Wee Herman and Paul Reubens that shoots through this documentary.
I mean, that's the part of the heartbreaking element of the whole thing, is that this choice that he makes between his public, I don't even want to say persona, because it's not like, you know, he's going out as Paul Reubens. You know, he's very private and guarded of Paul Reubens, and Pee Wee is where he put all of his eggs in that basket. And so seeing him make the choice to completely hide in that character is, you know, it's a choice that brought him massive success. It's a choice that brought him incredible scrutiny when certain revelations came out. But, you know, back in that time, the choice to be publicly gay would have ruined his ability to break, you know, into a different level. And he never would have had Pee Wee's Big Adventure, and he certainly never would have had Pee Wee's Playhouse, a show facing towards children, if he was an out gay performer. And so it's a heartbreaking choice, but he doesn't seem heartbroken by that choice.
Yeah.
Which is
Can I offer a reason why?
Yeah,
Can I offer
please.
a reason why?
Yep.
Because I think in many ways he wasn't hiding. I mean, Carol and Jacques, I wonder if you've both had the experience in acting class, I have, of what they call finding your clown. You know, where I was learning it, you know, they dump a big pile of old costumes and masks and silly things on the ground, and you pick and choose and you try things on, and usually you find something that connects with some part of you that maybe you didn't even know was there. And you go with it and you improvise, as he did when Paul Reubens was in the Groundlings, and something emerges. Now, before that, Paul Reubens had often dressed in drag. He was beautiful in drag, actually, and Pee Wee was a kind of drag. Plus, his love of 50s and 60s kid shows that he grew up with, Howdy Doody and Captain Kangaroo. We had Ranger Andy in Hartford. And yeah, I mean, there were double entendres, and he admits a dab of the gay, but the whole persona was held together by joy, by a kind of pre-sexual joy, by the kind of infantile glee that was sometimes sweet and sometimes naughty, but always, always with the exuberance of a child who hasn't yet learned the hard and bitter lesson of shame, which is, of course, one reason why the character could not survive the stupid scandal, because
Well, let's talk about the stupid scandals too. So, and Carolyn, I'm wondering, because you grew up in a different time from the rest of us, how much that penetrated your world. How aware were you, as somebody who was of the appropriate age to enjoy Pee Wee Herman as a children's show? How aware were you of the scandal?
I mean, I realized that. So I was pretty young when the scandal broke. They were still playing it in reruns. And Pee-wee's Big Adventure was like one of my favorite movies as a kid. But I remember like hearing about it. I learned through this. So I mean, I was like 8 or 9 when that scandal hit, really. And, as a child, like you hear it. And I was a kid who we had no TV rules in our house. So like I was up late watching like Letterman and Leno with my mom. So I remember all the like jokes about it. And I remember that kind of like sticking with me because it was somebody that I knew. A lot of times, like on Letterman or Leno, they're referencing something or someone that as like an 8-year-old that you don't know. But this was something I knew. And I remember it feeling like kind of a bummer because it was like, oh, now you can't watch Pee-wee anymore. But I just want to jump back to him hiding his sexuality. But now, like watching this documentary, I need to go back and rewatch all of Pee-wee's Playhouse, which I've never done. And that moment where he marries a fruit salad as his character of Pee-wee, I thought was like, that is comedy writing genius. It is so self-aware and so smart. And like, I mean, it's such like a cheesy little joke, but it was like all of the things, all of the sense of self that he injected into his comedy, I think is so amazing. But anyway, back to the scandal. I think that for me, it really like kind of like rocked that Pee-wee image and just it changed how you just didn't relate to him anymore at all. I think my brother had like a Pee-wee doll that my mom was like, yeah, maybe we don't have that anymore. He also had a Michael Jackson doll that like I feel like those were all like moved to the attic.
Well, I want to also say a little bit about this.
Wait a minute, wait. Can I just the fruit salad thing is just I know Jacques wants to say something, but the fruit salad thing is really interesting because it began out. It's a free association. It began as a taunt. I love fruit salad, and they say, if you love it so much, why don't you marry it? And he was like, okay, I'll marry it. And then it becomes this wonderful, weird metaphor for doing something that is a little bit forgiven, a little bit crazy and out there. That fruit salad thing is sort of the beauty of Pee-wee in in microcosm.
Okay, Jacques, we have a short amount of time. You can sort of take this in whatever direction you want to go. Although I do want to say that one of the things that I found that bothered me about the scandal is some of the moralizing that I saw after it, particularly Phil Hartman and Howard Stern. Just, I mean, glass houses, boys. But the thing is, I mean, you realize that the penalty he's paying is for being gay, much less than it is for having been touching himself in an adult movie theater. And you can tell that because Howard Stern and Phil Hartman feel comfortable dragging him across the coals. But Jacques, go anywhere you want.
I mean, with that first scandal, I don't know that it was clear to me at the time that it happened that it had anything to do with homosexuality. I think it was just he was at a porn theater and exposed himself in some way. And I kind of forgot about the second scandal, which was much more, had this tint of pedophilia to it, but certainly homosexuality with vintage beefcake magazines. But when you look at his, the reference points for what fascinated him, it was this kind of camp culture of a certain era that he amalgamized into Pee-wee's world. And that was particularly upsetting to see how only was he vilified, but even when he was ultimately found innocent, he had to plead guilty to get, or take, some kind of
He had to
plea.
take deals in both of the cases. He had to take deals.
Yeah,
that were very, very, very minimal punishment, but
and he bounced back from both of them. But for me, what is interesting in the process of this whole documentary is his choice to, especially as he was once again hiding, he was hiding his cancer diagnosis and his limited time, and that he does, even when he's not in character, he was still sort of in character. And then this final moment where you just get audio of him, where he's being sort of, for the first time, really completely transparent. Is heartrending.
This whole thing is just heartrending, and it's fascinating. And that whole question of persona, I found myself also thinking about Candice Bergen's book called Knockwood, about growing up kind of as Charlie McCarthy's sister, and the way in which sometimes people don't keep the right boundaries around their fictional creations, or maybe they have to have too much of a boundary. But the whole thing is fascinating. We're so lucky to have David Edelstein, Jacques Lamarre, and Carolyn Paine here to talk about it. It's called Pee-wee as Himself, a 2-part HBO original documentary directed by Matt Wolf. We're going to take a quick break and come back and make a whole bunch of endorsements. Time to make some endorsements here, but before we do that, thanks to the maestro, Dylan Reyes, our technical producer. Thanks to Jonathan McPants. He is the producer of The Nose. We're going to have everybody make endorsements. We don't have a lot of time, so endorsers, nostrils, members of The Nose, think of yourselves as having about a minute to talk, and it might work out. Carolyn Paine, why don't you get us started?
Okay, my first endorsement is True Crime Docs. Jacques and I have a text where we go back and forth and discuss them. I wish that you all could be part of that. And if anyone knows any good, really wild ones, let me know. And because I need salacious true crime in my life always. Also, Sirens, the new show out with Julianne Moore. And I still see Bill is giving a thumbs up on that. It is amazing. My favorite part of it is Glenn Howerton from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, playing a sad little man baby, and he does it so well. He is just one of my favorite comic actors. So there it is.
All right, Sirens, I believe on Netflix. Is that where it is?
Yes,
it is.
yeah,
Okay.
Netflix. Sorry.
All right, Bill, you're up. You're up next.
Okay, a new novel by Karen Russell called The Antidote. It blends both historical fiction and magical realism. It's set in Nebraska during a very real drought and dust bowl that ravaged the Midwest in the 1930s, but it includes a prairie witch who can take people's memories from them, a semi-sentient scarecrow, a camera that takes photographs of the past and possible futures. All of that is both allegorical and explicit about what America did to the indigenous people of the Midwest, and then went into collective amnesia. But in addition to all that seriousness, it's beautifully written and it's a compelling read.
So for the people who said you had me at Prairie Witch, once again, it's called, is it The Antidote by Karen Russell?
The Antidote, okay. Karen Russell.
All right, let's move along here. Irene Papoulis, are you going to endorse something?
Yes, I have another book, and I would call it sort of a summer beach read, but a literary beach read. It's not super light, but it's very much of a page turner. It's called The Colony by Annika Norlin, Norlin, who is Swedish. It's translated from the Swedish. She's also, I found out, a singer-songwriter in Sweden. And if you like stories that are sort of psychologically rich, what it does is it gets into the heads of social misfits. It's about what it means to find a place with people, love, what it means to be a leader, jealousy, ambition, church choirs, nature. It's got a lot of beautiful ingredients, and it's beautifully written and a wonderful read.
All right, Jacques Lamarre, you're next.
Another light read is Ron Chernow's 1,000-page plus Mark Twain biography that came out recently. I worked at the Mark Twain House for many, many years, And it's not without its issues as far as I'm concerned, but it is. I learned so much, and it is pretty much a birth to death look at his life, and it's not entirely dissimilar to a certain extent to the Pee-wee as himself. You know, his creation of this persona that then became a prison. So if you are an audio.
Oh, did we lose Jacques?
340.
I think actually the actual weight of the Ron Chernow book is freezing his computer right now. It's just sitting there like some kind of monstrosity. So let's go to David Edelstein. What are you going to endorse or recommend?
Well, I enjoyed the new biography Crumb by Dan Nadel. It is a celebration, warts and all, warts, pustules, eczema, bodily fluids and all, of the great cartoonist Robert Crumb and his alternative comics world, the period in which all those things became popular, those subversive comics for grown-ups. And it was a good reminder that crossing the line wasn't always a bad thing, that, you know, it sometimes got you celebrated as much as it got you canceled for a time. So that's my recommendation.
You know, it's also, I think it's kind of relevant too, because one of the things we see in the Pee Wee Herman documentary is the role that underground culture played and avant-garde culture played in making this mass market phenomenon. But specifically, there's kind of an underground cartoonist named Gary Panter whose work Reubens spots and says that's who's going to come up with the look of this series.
I thought he's the new Crumb when I saw that.
Yes. I had the same thought too. All right, so I am just going to quickly. One thing I'll just quickly endorse is just jump on Netflix. Jump on YouTube and look for Paul Reubens in 30 Rock. One of the later roles that he played, I don't want to say too much about it, but he plays this baron with this vast fortune. And I think there's a good-sized clip of it. It takes up almost the whole episode. And he's just spectacular. It is nothing like Pee Wee Herman. You would barely know that was Paul Reubens that you were watching there. I will also endorse a book, but I want to endorse specifically the audio version of the book. It's a fairly new book by the crime writer Richard Osman. It's called We Solve Murders. And the thing that I like about it a lot is the audible version is it's narrated by Nicola Walker, a tremendous British and maybe sort of Scottish actor who is, in fact, the lead role, the title role in Annika, but all kinds of other things. And that same kind of comic delivery that she does so well in Annika, she just delivers to all of the different speaking parts in this book. So We Solve Murders. If you're an audiobook person, this is the one you really want to get. Thanks to our wonderful panel today, David Edelstein, Jacques Lamarre, Carolyn Paine, Irene Papoulis, Bill Usman, Rich Hollant. I think I named everybody. I hope I didn't leave anybody out, but I hope you enjoyed this week of work, and we've got another exciting week of radio coming for you next week.
Talk about Torrington, Vernon, Danbury, Waterbury, Alderbury, Woodbury, hitting on New Britain, Vernon, I already said that one, Avon, Farmington, yeah. On the radio.